I'm going to create a idealized version of myself, a godlike, grandiose version of myself to cope with the pain of my insignificance, of not being seen and heard. And this kind of grandiose false self is the solution to this pain. And this is where it comes to narcissism. And then boom, the other side, codependent all the way to borderline. Welcome to another trigger-proof transmission. Whenever I get that calling in my heart to hit go live and to share, I get this little twinge of nervousness because I'm speaking of lately, if you haven't noticed, the conversations in our community have gotten a lot more raw and a lot more real. This is definitely on the heels of me beginning kind of to follow my dream of teaching my facilitators program. These are students that have been mastering the art of nervous system regulation and learning these cognitive tools and have been like, I really want to lead other people. And so this year I've begun that journey, which every time I start a journey, every time you decide to upgrade yourself in any way, it calls on an expansion of yourself, and it's uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. It's been uncomfortable to face my fears, to give myself permission to first leave chiropractic, and second, to just dedicate all of my time and energy to teaching people how to become cycle breakers in their family dynamics, in their family systems, their social systems, to heal, to create secure relationships, to be the author of their own lives rather than a slave to a system in the matrix of whether it's their work, whether it's their institutions, to really tap into creativity and give your gift to the world. And to do that, to give ourselves permission to do that in a world that wants us to comply and conform and just be a certain way, crabs in the bucket. It's terrifying. So as I go through it, it calls on me to greater expansion. And here I am lately with this latest iteration of my own expansion. I have been really noticing myself transforming the dynamics of all of my relationships. My marriage, it just goes through, it goes through another shedding of another layer, and we go deeper into intimacy. And I realize that the secure relationship that I have now was completely impossible to me before. I didn't know what a healthy relationship was. I didn't know what it felt like. I thought that when somebody just oversteps any boundaries for space and time, it means that they love you, because that's how I had that with my mother. So, I just tolerated that, and that got kind of that was part of my unresolved cycle in my nervous system that informed the people that I chose in my relationships. And it informed what I believed about myself. It informed what I felt that I deserved. And so clearly I didn't feel like I deserved a lot. I didn't feel like I was worthy and deserving. And so my relationships pretty much mirrored and reflected that. And it wasn't until my I was divorced, 10 years ago, and then going through a series of 8 or 9, 10 failed relationships after that, and finally getting to a place where wondering, are relationships even okay for somebody like me? Am I too broken? I don't trust myself. First of all, I definitely don't trust a woman after the pain that I experienced after my divorce. There's no way I want to go through that. So boom, I got one wall around my heart. Secondly, I don't trust myself. I really don't trust myself. How can I maintain a connection with somebody? Like if I have that now, Like, how do I know it's not just going to fizzle away like everything else? How do I know it's not just going to be this amazing, like, oxytocin, dopamine driven experience in the beginning, and oh my gosh, that honeymoon phase that we're also very addicted to. Uh, Eventually, is that really sustainable in a long-term relationship? And it had me looking at, after my last breakup, where the police were actually involved. Um, I took a break from everything to look at all of this, and I realized I made a huge distinction, and it was a very embarrassing one, and that was that, oh, I don't think I'm able to have a healthy, secure relationship. This is really what I wanted, is a healthy and secure relationship. I don't think I'm able to have that or achieve that unless I heal these trauma bonds. And I had to understand, I had to unpack it, I had to learn. I learned the polyvagal theory, I learned attachment theory, I integrated my shadows, I worked with younger selves, inner child, parts work. Like, I literally said, I don't care whatever it takes, I'm going to do the work. I'm not going to fake it, because I'm 43 years old and I've been faking it pretty well, because I can use my intellect and I can learn something and sound smart and teach it. But I wanted to actually live it. I wanted to be an authentic example of it before I felt comfortable teaching anything about relationships. So I just went into hiding for a little bit, went inside, and I hired a guide, several. I hired people who I looked at who had the relationships that I was really looking for. And I used to have mentors who were super duper successful, and then I became like them. I was successful, but all of their relationships weren't working. And so I thought, okay, this time, no BS, no words, no academics. I want to see a real life demonstration. I want to learn how to have a secure relationship. And because most of the time when you see relationship experts, so-called experts, all the books in the world and training is a cognitive understanding, but it doesn't necessarily mean you'll be successful in a relationship. In fact, what I've noticed with our clients is the more cognitive and mental, intellectual, university professors, doctors, engineers, masters, people who've really academics, often when we're in our minds, in our heads a lot, our hearts, there's a chasm between our brain, our head and our heart. And so that doesn't bode well in relationships. And so as smart as you are, doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have emotional intelligence and skills like empathy and conflict resolution and understanding how to repattern your nervous system and understand what's yours and what's the other person's and how to heal from conflict. Like, these are skills that we don't learn in school, and I needed to actually stop the cognitive understanding and start to learn how to go beneath that into my body and get a deeper understanding, so that, here's the goal. I want to have a secure relationship, and so I know what it's like to have relationship limbo, going, should I stay or go? And the answer that I discovered was, if you commit to healing your trauma bonds, the answer comes on the other side of that. So whatever question you have about your relationship, what I've discovered, and I'm going to go into this on this training today, was that if we focus, people are like, should I stay or go? Is this relationship salvageable? I say, I don't know the answer to that. I'm not like a guru or anything like that. You have the answer to that, but the answer does not come to you, through you, unless and until you've taken on the work of healing your trauma bonds. And I'm going to go into this in a moment, but this answers the question of, yeah, but what if my partner doesn't want to do it? What if they don't do it? Is it salvageable? And I tell them, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because if you take this on, what'll happen is two things will happen. Thing number one is you shift. When you heal your trauma bonds, the things that are frustrating in your relationship right now, if you're stuck right now and you're like, I got to get out of this. I don't know if I should, whatever. What should I do? Where should I begin? If we focus on healing our trauma bonds, what'll happen is we untangle the unconscious web that's causing the problem in the current relationship. The current relationship, I want you to look at as a players on a field, soccer field, let's say. And you're like arguing amongst one another. The trauma bond is actually the field itself. It's the context for which this relationship is actually formed. So is the field, a trauma bond will cause the field to be made of mud. So try getting around. You know, there's some fun times for sure. It's a lot of slippery and slidey stuff, huh? Just like in your relationships, some crazy times, right? But also, it's not really moving forward when you're trying to play soccer on a muddy field. So healing our trauma bonds is akin to kind of taking the players of that field and going onto a new field where everything is actually, it's turf. It's a lot better and more mobile, and there's more stable ground. And from there, two things happen. Number one, you realize, ooh, this, I don't want this person on my team. You know, the context of which this relationship started isn't really congruent with who I am. In fact, I was incongruent the whole time. That was my false self. The real self comes on, and you're like, this doesn't work. And you're able to untangle. And this is exactly what happened with one of our clients, Leslie, who is in a total trauma bond with a man for 6 years and just got pulled in and is like, I got to get out. It's killing me. Pulled in. I got to get out. It's killing me. Pulled back in. And I want to talk about why this happens and how she was able to literally this is an illusion. That's a total fantasy. It was definitely not like this. It wasn't overnight. Over about 6 to 8 months, finally be able to say no contact. Because he was, he was a cluster B guy. Like he was full on. Like it's not like he had any hope of stepping up and healing. Like he was bad news. He was the type of person. It's kind of like, is Donald Trump going to go kind of take ownership and get authentic? No, he's never going to do that. Some people are just definitely like completely I don't want to use the term hopeless, but so deeply traumatized that all they are is a false self, and there's no ability to take off the mask. I mean, she knew that he was having affairs the whole time, and he just wouldn't tell the truth, even though basically there was like the smoking gun, like there was evidence, and she's just like, she wanted to work on, why do I keep going back when I know this is, and he won't, because he's lying to me and all that stuff. So anyway, how she was able to get to the point where she's like, oh my God, I'm no longer under the spell. And a trauma bond is very much a spell. If you're meeting me for the first time, I forgot to introduce myself. If you're new, I'm Nima. I'm Dr. Nima Rahmany, but I'm no longer a practicing chiropractor for obvious reasons. I mean, I'm not for obvious reasons to you, but for me, for obvious reasons to me, was that everyone coming in to see me for chiropractic care was dealing with stress-related problems. And over the last 10 years, I've been going upstream and trying to help with stress-related problems. And I found kind of the holy grail of where stress comes from is attachment traumas from childhood that are kind of like adverse childhood events that we carry with us, and that they inform our relationship patterns and then our stresses, where most of our relational most of our traumas are relational. So I just kept going upstream and just studying that. And my first intent was to completely get an understanding of why I was the way I was, why I was going into these same narcissistic codependent patterns, why I kept, reliving this again and again and again, no matter who I was with. And then I discovered it was all because I was bonded. I was choosing people through the lens of my trauma and creating trauma bonds. So essentially, there's a trauma bond. For you to understand it, I want you to see, a lot of times it's shared in social media and everything as like this push-pull dynamic. In fact, actually, if you go on, what's her name? Holistic psychologist, ironically, the holistic psychologist has a holistic psychologist. I'm going to pop it up right here. Yeah, if you go to holistic psychologists, Instagram, just today, she's talking about relationship addiction. You can literally, just replace that with trauma bond, and it's exactly the same thing. It's kind of like this relational dynamic, essentially, where it's like Stockholm syndrome. It's like the person who's captured you. You want out, but you just can't escape. And they're usually highly sexually charged, highly volatile, highly abusive, not just physical, but there's emotional abuse going back and forth. Definitely in my last relationship, it was very much a part of it. But it's kind of like approach, avoidance, approach. I want you, get the hell away from me. Arguments constantly, you're constantly feeling anxious. There's some signs here that you might be in one. And I'm going to go over the signs so that you can actually look at it's a bit of a wake-up call, because if you know that there's stuff not going okay, a lot of times it's uncomfortable to deal with it, so people just sweep it under the rug. Hopefully, this social media is going to help awaken you so that you can take action on this. It's really important for your mental health, for your mental well-being, for your fulfillment in life, for your feeling of safety in your body, that we address this. For your health, it's a health concern. This is a health crisis, because most people in these trauma bonds, anxiety is through the roof, addictions are through the roof. The relationship itself becomes an addiction. We're really highly addicted to the chemicals of dopamine, of oxytocin, back and forth, and then also cortisol, right? So essentially, a trauma bond is a repetition. It's a repetition. It's a muddy field where you're repeating the same dynamic with a parent. It usually starts off kind of like this, where there's two roles, and I don't want to label people. I hate labels, because the cluster B personality types are all just adaptations to trauma. It's just complex post-traumatic stress injuries, right? But then the medical field loves to label them. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, the extremes on those poles, NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, and a borderline personality disorder. And then we have kind of like a secure person in the middle. On this side, we have narcissistic traits, and on this side, we have codependent traits. And at the end of the day, if you've watched my, definitely watch Anatomy of a Toxic Relationship, my other video, it's on YouTube. This will go deeper into that. Make sure you watch that. But essentially, it's a spectrum. And we all fall into that, depending on our level of trauma, depending on how our nervous system is doing that day. So you're not just a one self. You have like 100,000 different parts to you. You have a little sadistic part of you. You have a little pleaser, good little boy, good little girl part of you. You have a little weakling within you, and you have a tyrant within you. So we have all these parts. So you're not just one individual self, you're a conglomerate, but and so it's changing all the time. So this is what makes it so complicated. But essentially what'll happen is the narcissist will meet the borderline, and that's where both parties have the same wound. Growing up, they didn't feel seen, didn't feel heard. Often abusive parents or abuse in the form of pedestalizing the child and not giving them any boundaries with the world. One of my clients has narcissism, and she had the upbringing where her mother never said no. She goes, whatever she wants. And so that is kind of trauma to a child because there's no boundary between her and the earth and the world. And so when the real world happens, you're not able to handle because you basically are a childlike state for the rest of your life. You're literally a baby. Emotionally, you're a child because you haven't individuated. This is one of the key components that creates narcissism from childhood. And this is why it's so important that you learn this, especially if you have children, because this is why we call this the cycle breakers collective. Because it's a cycle that didn't start with you or your partner. You look at the upbringing and you see a person who had a mother based on, cultural often. This is why we see this a lot in Indian, in Chinese, in Persian, in Greek. Like you see this a lot. I mean, almost every Persian I know has narcissistic parenting, and almost every Persian I know kind of is somewhere along the lines of the spectrum of narcissism, in case you haven't noticed. Just watch the Shahs of Sunset. If you don't believe me, just watch the show, The Shahs of Sunset. It's a facepalm moment as a Persian. It's one of those I can't look, but I can't look away. But it all comes from trauma passed down where the child becomes an extension of the parent. So all the shames, all of the fears, all of the expectations get dumped onto the child, and the child doesn't feel safe to kind of individuate, to go off and be their own person, right? So it's really, that's trauma to a child. The child then experiences one of two responses. This feeling of not feeling seen and heard, needing to perform, needing to be part of love that's conditional. They will have to have a solution to this pain. Solution number one, which the narcissist takes on, is My name is Dr. Nima Rahmany, and you've been listening to the Trigger Proof, designed to teach you the most important skill necessary for a dramatically changing world, which is nervous system regulation. And becoming trigger proof doesn't mean trigger less. It means learning how to regulate ourselves to bring us back to center so that we can then be governed by our purpose rather than from our wounds. Anytime there's reactivity, there's a wound. And if you're curious and inspired to learn more, join us at Breathwork and Badassery or the overview experience. There's a difference between listening to a podcast and actually showing up live and doing the work with a badass community who's all about breaking cycles of intergenerational trauma. It didn't start with you, but it can end with you if you're willing to do the work. See you at the next perfect time. I'm going to create a idealized version of myself, a godlike, grandiose version of myself to cope with the pain of my insignificance, of not being seen and heard. And this kind of grandiose false self is the solution to this pain. And this is where it comes to narcissism. And then boom, the other side, codependent all the way to borderline. The response is the opposite, is that, the rage and the pain that they have towards not feeling seen, they'll internalize it. There'll be an internalization of this pain, and shifting to a solution where they completely blur themselves. They disappear. They completely disappear and take on this passive role where they just be invisible. They become like boundaryless and merge and fuse with whoever's there. You know, if you, it's the classic example. If you see a person, a woman who dates one guy and all of a sudden, because he likes rap music, she's a big fan of the rap music. And then she breaks up with him, goes out with this other guy. He loves country. And now all of a sudden she's like the biggest country music fan. It's this fusion. It's the strategy that the codependent, or becoming kind of like a pleaser, a slave, abandoning yourself so that you can then find a connection, and you basically, get engulfed by a narcissist. And the two have such similar wounds that it's kind of like when you meet, it's kind of like soulmates. It's like the narcissist basically, they strike a deal with the codependent borderline and says, look, I'm going to love you the way your mother never did. And creates this idealized, fantasized version of you. You're the best. You're the most beautiful. Oh my goodness, you're the sexiest. And then completely lays on the love. This is the love bombing / grooming phase, where you're basically being taken into that world. Right? When you're a borderline / a codependent, it's basically like crack cocaine to you. It's like, for the very first time, you get to see yourself and feel absolute love towards yourself through the gaze of the narcissist, And so you experience self-love for the first time. And in fact, they turn you into a narcissist. It's highly addictive. It's this experience most times. Oh my God, it was love at first sight, love bombing, da 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 da. I just love him so much. The truth, you didn't love him. It wasn't them or her, because the same thing happens. Men, women, same thing. I'm just using the classic examples, if I could be stereotypical just for the sake of being brief, talking to a camera. It's not that you love them. It's you fell in love with the idealized version of yourself. Ouch. Ouch. It's you. You experience self-love through their hall of mirrors, as Professor Sam Vaknin calls it. It's kind of like, it's like this need to be adored and worshipped. On my last webinar, so we were talking about this, and this I forget who it was. She's like, "Oh my God, I love being love bombed," and she was very honest about it. She goes, "Yeah, who doesn't?" The people who love being love bombed. We love being love bombed when we completely lack self-love. Self-love is the actual antidote to trauma bonding. And it's the hardest thing to get to, but I'm going to talk about it. But essentially what happens is people say, oh, the narcissist doesn't have any empathy or anything like that. And it's like, oh, let's look again. There's a good way that they know exactly how to love bomb you and what the right things to say, because it's kind of like, I know your pain. Oftentimes, the clients that we work with, that we're helping kind of untangle the impacts of all of this kind of abuse and kind of break free from these trauma bonds, they'll be in tears going, nobody ever saw me like he did. Right? It's like nobody ever saw, he was the first one to really see me. In other words, he was a surrogate mother, the mother that I didn't have. And that is the foundation of the trauma bond. It's on the playing field of compensating for the love that you didn't receive from mom and dad. You didn't receive it. And so now you've started this dance and this deal that's struck. He says, I'm going to love you. I'm going to be the mother that you never had, on one condition: you're going to do the same for me. And I'm going to provide you with all of the compliments that help you not feel all of your insecurities and self-doubts for a minute, to lower your defenses. And then once the defenses are lowered and I create a fantasy, and there's a fantasy that's created. This is the key. How do they do that? By creating a fantasy. Fantasy of a beautiful life, of money, whatever it is, money, the life. My ex's fantasy was leaving her life as a madam and doing something legitimate. And I was the opportunity. I was the target. It was me, you know? But because I didn't love myself, the behavior, the her love bombing parts, which are in her way of completely fusing and merging into everything that I would love, which basically she took on an entirely new identity. She went from being a madam who ran a gluten-free cafe, total kind of like activist and amazing kind of outside persona, pillar of the community, but in the underground, she was a madam exploiting women. And I just kind of like, because she was validating all of my insecurities through her form of love bombing, through sex, through using sex and everything, because that's where the borderline will use sex as a form of manipulation. And because I was so in my fear, in my impulses and instincts, and not in my heart, not in my intuition, I was so susceptible to that. It was right away. It was, we just put aside everything else, and we both had this shared fantasy. And the reason why I say that, the reason why I say that is because a shared fantasy is critical for a trauma bond to happen. We must have a shared fantasy for the trauma bond to happen. Yeah, that's where trauma bonds are steeped in, this fantasy of this amazing love that, you know, these feelings that come up, you know, sex and orgasm and dopamine and all of that stuff, and the love bombing. This becomes an addiction. Why? Well, when are we most susceptible to addiction? Well, when our current reality is so shitty, when we don't love ourselves, when we are steeped in shame, when we have not resolved a grief. In the case of one of our clients, Leslie, she was a perfect storm for this trauma bond to happen, because she had just gone through the grief of losing her partner. He died. And then a few months later, boom, she starts this trauma bond relationship. Usually it comes in the form of, you know, a damsel in distress, a knight in shining armor, a princess who needs a king or prince to fawn on her. These are all childhood Disney fucking fantasies that ever since you were a little child have been carefully programmed into your mind through movies and romance novels. They're not real, but we have these expectations of love, of this, the love bombing and getting compliments and finally feeling like we're like so amazing and being idealized. And that the moment that hook comes in, that, okay, we're together, boom, that's when there's an abrupt change. Now that's when the narcissist says, because he's taken some snapshots of, you know, this perfect idealized person that he has in his fantasy. And if you don't match that for one reason or another, boom, you weren't what I expected. This is totally not what I expected out of you. I can't believe that you said that. I can't believe that and now the conversation goes from pedestalizing you to completely throwing you in the pit, devaluing you, thinking you're not enough. Like, what are you doing? Like, nobody's going to love, like horrible, horrible things. Now, the abrupt split between that pedestalization and devaluation is the formation, is the root cause of the trauma bond. Because in that moment where you've now taken on that surrogate mother that was going to love you the way that you never have been loved before, then they turn into the abusive one. You're like already hooked because you cannot get rid. You can't disown your mother. So the rest of your relationship then becomes this toxic cycle dance where you go from those various stages again and again. Some call it the cycle of abuse, but it's very, very predictable. And it all comes back to this context of two very traumatized souls. Now, believe you me, when I first realized this, it fucking just blew my mind. I was like, all right, no wonder. I got to dismantle this. Because I remember there was a moment where I said, okay, God, please give me a sign. Give me a sign, because I can't leave this. It's too hard to leave. It's too addictive. I can't leave. Just when I think I'm out, she pulls me back in. She'll send, sexual kind of stuff, and I'm feeling lonely in that moment. Fuck, okay, just one more night. Okay, fine. It's kind of the song from Maroon 5, One More Night. That's trauma bond. I cross my heart and I hope to die. I'll only stay with you one more night. Just listen to the words of that song. After I realized what trauma bond is, I saw it in every song. Pretty much every song out there that talks about pain in a relationship is describing a freaking trauma bond. I love the way you lie. Eminem with Rihanna. Just listen to the words. Just go on your Spotify or Apple Music or whatever thing, or on YouTube, and just Love the Way You Lie by Eminem featuring Rihanna, and listen to the words. Trauma bond. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. Pretty much every relationship Eminem has is a trauma bond. And we all are guilty of this at some point. Let me know if you resonate. Am I the only one here? Do you resonate with this or not? Absolutely. It's so common. So when I realized I was in this game and I was hooked in this, it really helped to dissolve some of the shame that I was carrying, because I felt so ashamed. I felt so ashamed for tolerating abuse. I felt so ashamed for being abusive. I felt so ashamed for being intelligent, but then being with somebody that I couldn't feel comfortable or even proud to be around. I was concealing her identity around my family and hiding from my family because I felt such shame about myself. I'm like, and it's weird because, I'm a decent guy and I have some amazing gifts to give to this world, but this one thing, one part of this myself, and I'm successful, but this one part of myself I can't get right. So I had to unpack it. And so the goal of this transmission for you is to help you look at a few signs to see whether or not you find yourself in this situation. If you do, great. You've gone from unconscious to conscious. That's the first step towards breaking the cycle. Because if you don't know that you're stuck in this cycle, you just think that person's an asshole or there's something wrong with you. I'm here to tell you, you're not gonna be able to heal that. But if you look at it with a trauma lens, with a lens of the nervous system, you realize there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not your fault. It's not even their fault. You're stuck in a dynamic. You're in a trauma bond. It's a dynamic. And you can sit here and point fingers and he was a narcissist. Ah! This is one of the side effects of this kind of healing trauma community, is everyone's on a different level of where they're at. And when you're stuck in victimhood, there's no way that you're going to heal. But when you look at this, when you enter this conversation of trauma bonds, you then realize that you're both the victim and the perpetrator. You're both the narcissist and the codependent, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not your fault either. And so my goal is to help start this conversation so that people don't hide because of the shame. If you're listening and you haven't done anything about what I'm saying, it's probably because you feel ashamed about it. And you feel ashamed because, for good reason, it's mortifying to our false selves, to our egos. We're so run by ego and we want to look good. And it doesn't look good to admit that I was codependent. It doesn't look good to admit that I was showing up as maybe covert or overtly narcissistic. So hold on one second. I'm getting a message here to close some tabs. And there we go. Hopefully that's helpful. There we go. Boom. Is that better? Okay. Beautiful. So here we are. So we don't have to have shame in it. We don't have to hide anymore. This community is about telling the truth. We can't heal from this without authenticity, and we can't have authenticity without vulnerability, and we can't have vulnerability without courage. So I know what it's like to be scared, but if you're in this room, or if you're in this conversation, you've found yourself on to my content in social media, wherever you are, Facebook Live, YouTube on a replay or a podcast. I'm really glad that you're here. There's a reason why you're here. And everything you experienced in the last, it says 38 minutes, notice what's happened in your body. Are you noticing your heart rate going up? Are you notice your face feeling flushed? Some people say, my God, you make me really upset. You trigger me. I've been crying the whole time that I've been listening to you. I've been shaking. I can't breathe when you're speaking. What do you think that means? I work in trauma. I'm not trying to traumatize you. It means that the truth is very triggering. That's why people don't tell the truth. The discomfort you feel right now is why most people wear masks. Because we wear masks because we've abandoned our authentic selves so much. We think that our authentic self is not lovable. If you saw the real me, you wouldn't love me, you would reject me. So we end up rejecting ourselves in the meantime, and then putting on these masks, and we don't even know that they're there, but it's exhausting. And deep down, we want to be loved for who we are, but we're terrified of showing who we are because of rejection. And this is a very common thing. This is a part of your hero's journey on this planet. So I'm so glad you're here and you're having this conversation. And there's a few signs I want you to look out for that I kind of took some notes here. Let me just see. There it is, 6, 7, I'm not sure. So here it is. Take a look. Number 1, if you've noticed yourself falling into another person's victim story and subscribe to their reality, and you believe their reality as kind of, what is it called? As over the top it might seem. There's some, the spectrum, like of conspiracy theorists to the COVIDians, who, like, you have like extremes on both camps, right? The truth is in the middle. You have extremes on both camps. But let's say you have somebody and you're in their life, and you've now totally subscribed to their reality, and you believe their reality to the point where you've lost yours. You're like, okay, well, whatever their reality is, that is one of the signs that you might be in a trauma bond. Number 2, you can't stop thinking of this person, even though they have absolutely destroyed your mental health. They've caused physical injuries. You're trying to leave, but it's been 6 months. It's been a year. It's been 2 years you've passed, and you're still grieving. You're still in a form of grief, right? You're still grieving. You might be in a trauma bound. It's number 2. To heal that, it's not just about like forgetting them. You got to realize it's not about them. It's 2 years that it's not about them. There's a piece of you that you've lost. And so, which is the fantasy, by the way. And so if you dare to forget them, it's like losing a part of yourself. It's very painful. It's very complicated. You can't do it by reading a book. You can't do it by just listening to this podcast or Clubhouse room or just asking questions even on Clubhouse. Can't do it from YouTube video. It's far deeper than that. We have to actually go in and shift that. And most people don't have the courage. I remember this one woman, she's actually a marriage and family therapist and a social worker. She helps people through their relationships. And we were on a discovery call one time. And she's like in tears. She's like, I can't do this. It's killing me. And it's impacting my 2-year-old daughter. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I'm not there for her because this relationship is totally taking me out. And this is it's scaring me because this is exactly what I experienced growing up with my mother, with another person. And I'm like, can you see how the cycle is passed down? You see that kind of dual mothering root cause where the toxic trauma bond kind of begins. So she was like, I got to do it. Okay, I'm doing it. I'm ready. I'm ready to do this. And she knows rationally, she helps people through this stuff. But then all of a sudden, when it came time to pull the trigger and commit and actually register to do it, she all of a sudden, her Zoom call cut off. I reached out. I texted her. I'm like, are you there? Oh, I lost you. And she was gone. She ghosted me. Somebody who is highly intelligent, licensed marriage and family therapist, ghosted me at the terrifying notion that, I guess she thought that I was going to tell her you can't see him again, which is not the way we do it, by the way. FYI, don't go to somebody who's going to all of a sudden tell you, it's because it's like an addiction. It's like you have to stop alcohol. You have to quit cold turkey. No, you don't, actually. You can actually use the relationship exactly how it is to break the trauma bond. On the other side of it, they either step up to meet you, which is what we've seen with some of our clients. They're like, should I stay or go? They've been married 10 years, wasn't working, infidelity. She does the work, finally moves on. Well, guess what? Within 6 months, he stepped up and shifted himself. They're back together now, and they've never been healthier, and they still have challenges, but they're able to meet and have a unified mutual relationship because she stepped up for herself. She was the one that shifted her entire field. It's like when you do the inner work and break these trauma bonds, what happens is your relationship turns from like an away game. This feels like an away game to, this feels like a home game. I'm not like a victim, a bystander. I have a say in how this relationship goes. I have a say in receiving a mutual love of a person who feels safe and is committed and doesn't kind of put all of their emotional responsibility on me. I'm the avoidant usually. When you're with codependent / borderline type of person, their expectation is you're gonna fix my emotion. Like they use relationships as their emotional regulation, which is a lot of work. If you've ever been told I can't win with you, it's a lot of work to be around you. That's what I'm talking about. Not that you're bad. It's just that's the experience this unresolved wound creates for your partner. So, prolonged grief is number 2. Number 3 is you feel energetically, spiritually tied to them. Okay, kind of like you think of them. This was definitely me with the first woman who I dated, Sarah. I'll never forget her. After my divorce, the first person, like I would think of her, and then boom, a text message would come, or I would text her, and she would, and even if we broke up, like we would go through this push pull dynamic back and forth, like about 30 times over 4 years. And if we would go a period of like 2 or 3 months and not see one another. And then I would start thinking of her. I'd be like, God damn, like, that connection or that night where we did this and that, and wow, it was amazing. And then all of a sudden, boom, oh my God, I was just thinking about you. Boom, and we're right back. And it's just, so that's one of them. Number 3, does that resonate with you? Have you ever been in that situation? It's crazy, isn't it? It's like, oh my God, we're soulmates. We are soulmates. We're twin flames. We're twin flames. We're soulmates. They're usually, as Russ loves to say, you think you're soulmates, but you're actually cellmates. They can easily pull your strings, and you're completely out of control. Totally like a badass at work, no problem. But around this person, you turn into like an 8-year-old. How the fuck does that happen? It's like, this is Jen, who I've been working with. Definitely, if you haven't watched, please go and watch How to Break a Trauma Bond in 6 Months. Just did an interview, because you get to see somebody who did it. And she was like, how could I be, and she shared this, she's like, how could I be this badass entrepreneur crushing it, and then just completely like a blob without any boundaries in my personal relationship, right? So that's number 3, is you feel energetically, you're spiritually tied to them. They can pull your strings, and they call, they text right when you think of them. That's a good sign you're in a trauma bond. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying what it is, and there's a way out. I'm going to tell you about how to get out in just a moment. The next one is, if you're constantly finding yourself making excuses for the person. My mom would always say, yes, your father, his mother did die. His mother, that's how he is. He was like idolized from ages 0 to 14 by his mother and his family, and then boom, his mother dies at 14. So that is like textbook foundation for narcissistic, for narcissism. I'm not saying he's got NPD, but I'm saying he's definitely on that spectrum, and more kind of like a covert. So making excuses. Just make excuses for that person constantly. If you're constantly finding yourself making excuses for that person, notice that it'll probably be like when you were making excuses or trying to fix dad. Dad's an alcoholic, or mom's a complete alcoholic. You got to clean up after him or take care of everybody else, right? So there it is. Number 5 is you fall for the love bombing and intermittent reinforcement, like you believe it. Like you actually believe it. But he said that I was like the most amazing, most beautiful. He said that I was special. I felt special. Like you believe it. I'm not saying you're not special. But the more problem I have with self-love, the more easily I am able to be manipulated by somebody. And I can sense it now right away when somebody first meets me and they start bombing me with compliments. There was a time where I would easily fall for it. In fact, with my ex, I fell for it hook, line, and sinker. She's like, oh, you're amazing. You helped me with my food sensitivities. And oh my gosh, I wanna help you with your business. And I was like, wow, they're gonna love me. I'm lovable. Oh. Right? I believed it. I bought into it. Right? That's a good sign. And you fall for it, and this intermittent reinforces these little breadcrumbs. And just as you're about to leave, just as you're like, screw this, I'm done, and they're threatened, that's when they start the love bombing again. All of a sudden, they're nice and until the defenses get lowered, and then boom, back to devaluing. And the cycle continues because you're a rat in a cage, and there's a scientist giving you little reinforcement, little sugar pills. And you just keep hitting that thing, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally, just as you're about to give up, you get another one, and that keeps you going for another 20 years until you do the work and break from the trauma bond. Some experts say it's impossible. I'm just letting you know. The academics and the experts, they'll all say that. But I have evidence to show in real life case studies and examples that you'll be hearing from. I'm going to be doing little interviews over the next little while. I'd really want you to, like Jen's, definitely watch Jen's. After hers, I was like, wow, this is amazing. How many other people in my community really want to share their story? And the hands start going up. So I'm about to do some interviews with some people who've actually done it so that you know that it's possible. Don't believe the experts that say you can't. Yes, there's a spectrum. Yes, not everyone can do it. You have to have some inner resources and outer resources. You can't expect to be a damsel in distress being rescued. 90% of the people who apply for our help to help them break those trauma bonds, they're looking to be rescued. They're not really looking to do their own work. They're looking to be rescued because they're not willing to have a fair exchange. They expect just help me. They want the kind of like they want the free thing, and that's not the attitude. The attitude is I want to do this, and I'm ready to do a fair exchange for it. Fair exchange is the way that you have secure relationships. A secure relationship cannot be happening without a fair exchange. So many people try, because you don't know what a fair exchange secure relationship is, when people apply to have their trauma bonds. Can you see me? Oh, it's working. When people apply to have their trauma bonds assisted, you got to be past beyond the rescuing. You got to actually be committed to doing the work. No one's coming to rescue you, and there's a fair exchange. And so that's difficult, especially when you're codependent and you've been, the victim of abuse. You're like feeling ground zero. There might be some time before you're ready for this level of work. And so it's a step-by-step thing. And here's the best part. It's a lifelong learning. So I'm still in the process of healing. Right. And my current relationship with my wife, is part of the healing of that. In other words, the way we heal trauma bonds is by secure relationships. Secure relationships will help you heal those trauma bonds. So, and the sixth one that you're in a trauma bond is that you constantly are holding on to hope that this person will come back or leave their partner for you. The classic case is, we've been waiting for the divorce they're separated, and we're waiting. It's been 3 years. He keeps promising. He promised he'll leave. I've been with him for 2 years. You're holding on to hope. Classic trauma bond. Maybe he'll leave his wife. They're having problems. He's not happy in his marriage. And then 6 months later, 1 year later, 2 years later, he's like, I can't leave. Just as he's about to leave, I can't leave. And so that's a trauma bond. That's classic. So those are some signs I want you to look at. And so the way that we approach this, the way that I had to approach this, it was to become a cycle breaker, to realize and acknowledge this wasn't my fault, that it was part of a cycle. There's no shame in it. And that if there's, you need first of all, I couldn't do it alone. You need a guide and you need a community to help you. Why? Because as you share your story with other people who are actually in the same situation, sometimes in the exact opposite kind of place, a lot of our students in our programs are, some were cheated on, others were the ones who did the cheating, right? And so to hear that in a community that's completely committed to healing, non-judgment, complete non-judgment, like this is what you went through and what. Make sure you subscribe. Hey, I just realized it finishes at an hour, and I can actually record something that you can splice at the end to conclude the training. So, yeah, that's what I think that I'll do. I'll send you the finish, and I'll even just say, hey, it just got cut off. It just got cut off with Facebook. The recording tech issue just got cut off, so I'm just jumping in and just to say, talking about community, just to say community is really important in healing it. So if this is something you're now ready for, something you're ready to actually transform, we have our Cycle Breakers collective portal coming up, and you can jump in and join us and really look at the page. Check out what the whole thing entails and see how ridiculous it is. And we'd love to have you if you're inspired, if you're ready to be a nerd for neuroscience and polyvagal and attachment theory and shadow work, literally all of it in 3 months.